Wonderful. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much. Is this working? Uh, Oh, I can't hear it because, right, we have a small problem here in the store and that we have lost something. But for those of you watching it, I hope that the sound will be okay for you. Anyway, thank you for coming out this evening. Thank you, virtual audience, for joining us. And Elise, this is sort of dumb talking into a dead microphone, but here we are.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. I'm thrilled. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And you should be thrilled that the apparent rain is going to hold off for at least another hour because Phoenicians don't travel in the rain. No, I'm serious. Things
Oh,
flood
really?
really
Okay.
fast because we have caliche right underneath the whole layer of it.
Oh,
And so everything floods in a hurry.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So actually you're staying up in the mountains, aren't you?
I am. It's gorgeous
It
there. I
really
love
is
it.
nice.
Yeah.
A long commute, but
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm so used to. I live in the suburbs of New York City, so to me, it actually doesn't even feel like a long commute.
well, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Less traffic. Right.
Yeah.
So I read in your bio that, you are a sports reporter. You've done all kinds of exciting things, but the part I loved the most was the fact that you're so short in order to interview people. How do you do that? How do you talk to like a 6'7" basketballer or some giant football guy when you're
I
even
know.
smaller
I am.
than I am?
I'm 5 feet 0 inches,
Right.
and I my first sport that I covered was the NBA. So I know. I know.
They carried you around.
Yeah, they should have, right? So I would stand on a milk crate. My producer would carry a milk crate with me, and even then, I was like that, because I'm still short, and and then I used the milk crate for every athlete. And then there were some athletes that were so big and wide, like Shaquille O'Neal, that I was like, no milk crate will work. You need to sit and I'll stand. And that's what we did with him. But because of that, I decided I am making Kate, my main character, tall because I want to know what it's like not to be so short. I want to know what it's like to be taller. So I did that, and she doesn't stand on milk crates.
I'm happy to hear that. There's a long tradition of that. I remember, I think years and years ago, were any of you young enough to remember when there were magazines that came out of Hollywood like Photoplay? And, it had all the gossip from this was Hedda Hopper and what was that other ghastly woman's name? I can't remember. But anyway, I think it was Shane. Alan Ladd was in Shane, and Alan Ladd was our size. He's a little bitty guy, and so they either had to like dig a hole for the woman to stand in for the love
Right.
scenes, or they had to put him on
Yeah.
a crate. And I've always thought about that being small myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
That it's hard to move in a world of giants.
It is. It is. And I hate high heels. I just and as I've gotten older, it's harder and harder. So, yeah. Yeah. You and me are both in our flats.
I know.
We're owning it. We're owning
That's right.
our height.
Right. So, how did you get started in? I mean, this is relevant because the series, this is book 3, is about somebody who does what Elise actually does. So, how did you get started in your own career, not writing, but as a professional sports reporter?
I started actually as a news reporter, and I did. I read a bio about Edward R. Murrow when I was in elementary school, and I always wanted to be a reporter. I wanted to have that job that saved the world and did something really big. And then I kind of came into it at a time when it was like, if it bleeds, it leads, and there was a lot of crime and a lot of just a lot of tough things, like a lot of tragedies and everything. I was at WNBC in New York, and it wasn't what I imagined or hoped as an Edward R. Murrow thing. But then I had the opportunity to cover sports, and Fox Sports Network was looking for someone to cover the NBA lockout, which was a news story, but for a sports station. So I went over there, and it was just really nice to do something different. I mean, even though it was a news story, it wasn't the intensity of the news stories that I had
Right.
covered.
Plus, it was only a tragedy for half the people, the ones that lost.
Yeah, it's exactly. Like you win, you lose. So we really clicked, the sports station and me, and then I went off and did that, and I just, for the most part, really enjoyed it, and that's where I wanted to set my first series. It was really nice to go back there in my mind and enter that world again for the books.
So, what brought you to writing if you were busy being a sports reporter?
I stopped reporting when my first son was born.
Okay.
And I was reporting, I would go places for a month at a time, like the final, like March Madness and spring training in Florida. So I was away a lot, and I decided I needed a change in my life. I wanted to be home. And after about 4 or 5 years, I missed writing, which surprised me. Of all the things to miss, I thought I might miss the deadlines or the adrenaline of it all, but I missed writing. And then I had to learn how to write a novel, which, is very different than writing something that's one page and very short. And so I took a lot of classes.
Where did you stay? I mean, NYU, I guess, has a lot of courses in New York, but where did you attend writing school?
I went and I did adult classes, so I didn't get a degree or anything. I feel like I deserved 2 degrees for all the classes I took, but I didn't get anything. I went to Sarah Lawrence.
Oh, okay.
They have an adult writing center, and then I took classes at Gotham Writing Center, which was all online. And I did a lot through ITW also. They always have their amazing, my friends out here, we're all fans of the conference. They had a lot of great seminars and craft events, and
they have Pitch Fest, Craft Fest, but
Pitch Fest is where I got my agent.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
but Craft Fest is like the step before Pitch Fest,
exactly,
right? Yep.
exactly.
Well,
Yes.
that's wonderful. Well, it helps that you live in New York since the Thriller
Yes.
Fest annually
Yeah.
meets there. It had its original meeting here.
I didn't know that.
It's a long story. We won't go into it. It was a drunken remark from me at a conference that created ITW. So they had it here as a sort of thank you. And in July in Phoenix at the Arizona Biltmore, where you can't walk anywhere, it was not a success. And I said to them, if you really want this to prosper, you're going to need to move it. And so they decided to put it in New York because of the easy access to publishers.
Okay, what I'm learning is anyone who's really important, you know them.
No, no, I've just been doing this a really long time. And as you've already found out, I'm not afraid to speak up. So it kind of works out that way. No, it was a really serendipitous moment. And we had a number of thriller writers who were kind of unhappy with lack of recognition and lack of training and all. And so my actual words were, so start your own fucking organization. But that's not generally what's reported. Right. Anyway, I think it's great. There are writers conferences all over. People like Maui. There used to be a great one in San Diego. Is there still one in San Diego? I've taught at San Diego. I haven't been invited to Maui, alas, and now it would probably be hard. Yeah, and Sun Valley, that's a notable writers conference. They're all over the place.
Yeah.
But I would think because New York has a number of actual institutions that have writing classes, it would have been great for you.
It was. It worked out really well for me because there was so much that was close by. And we have a tight community because I'm in the suburbs, I'm in Connecticut, of Connecticut authors that are also very supportive and just like my fellow authors here. But that also are like beta readers and all of that. So it's nice. It's nice.
So you decided to write what you know?
Yes, I did. I did.
Okay. I mean, that's such a cliche. I'm almost embarrassed to utter it, but nonetheless. So you decided to create a series with a sports reporter patterned on yourself. Now, in this book, we're talking tennis, but I have not read the first 2. So take us through how it works up to book 3 here.
Yeah, sure. So in the first book, in Lights Out, my main character, Kate, is suspended. And an NBA player who lives in her hometown of Greenwich, Connecticut, is found murdered in his mansion. And Kate's best friend, who's his widow, is the main suspect for that. And Greenwich is really close to where I live, so
I've been in Greenwich. We have friends in Greenwich. Yeah.
yeah. So I wanted to kind of explore that area and the dynamics of all of that. So there's a lot of domestic stuff in there too. And then in Dangerous Play, so Kate's based on me, but she's so much cooler than me. She's like a way cooler version
And
than
taller.
me. Taller and cooler. She's an Olympic gold medalist, a soccer player, where, I'm a soccer mom. And she's like, her demons are dark and interesting, and mine are like very boring and, not worth writing. So yeah, she's definitely more interesting. But in Dangerous Play, we go back in time to soccer and her time as a teenager on the youth national team. And what was really fun for me to do with soccer is I covered a little bit of soccer, but my younger son is a D1 soccer player, and he played on he was at the national team when he was young. And so I really got to come to soccer from two different ways, and I got to explore that with Kate's background in the second book. And then the U.S. Open was just one of my favorite events growing up, because I grew up close to that. I mean, it's right there. And
was it Forest Hills, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
It's and it's also such an interesting event. I loved covering it because, to me, tennis is a very lonely sport. You're playing by yourself. The other sports were team sports, and you're not even allowed to talk to your coach during the game. And you live or die based on your salary. You get paid depending on how far you go in the tournament. So there's so much so much pressure, like a different kind of pressure. And then it's such a tight community. You're traveling with the people you're competing against. Coaches jump from one player to the other. And then the family dynamics of parents who are coaching their children and spouses who are competing with one another. It's such a rich environment for a thriller.
It really is. Actually, in real life, it's been a kind of rich environment. I remember years ago, I can't remember where I was. Yvonne Goolagong was, and she was an Aboriginal. I don't know if you remember her, but she was kind of broke a number of barriers, getting into professional tennis. And I remember watching her and thinking, what a really brave person she was, I wish I could remember where it was I saw her. But anyway, it was some major tournament. And, if you follow the Williams sisters or, Billie Jean King, an icon. And, I'm just talking women's tennis, but I can remember some of the great men's tennis tournaments, too.
Yeah.
Remember Bjorn Borg falling to his knees when he beat McEnroe? There's so much drama in it all. You don't even have to make a lot of it up.
No, I mean, that's true, although it is all fiction. I covered Venus Williams when she beat Serena Williams in 2001, I think it was. And it was either the semis or the quarters. And I had a one-on-one interview with her. And there are two things about Venus. I love Venus Williams. I just think she's down to earth and just such a impressive woman. So in the interview, when she was talking about the U.S. Open, she was saying how it was so emotional to play Serena, because she's like on the one hand happy to win, and on the other hand she's like, Serena, you can do better. Come on, don't make that mistake again. The thing I will always remember about Venus, though, is I was 7 months pregnant, and she walks in. She just won this tournament. She's like, are your feet swollen now that you're pregnant? And we had this whole conversation about being pregnant. And I'm just like, okay, you just won a major tournament and you want to talk about me? Like I just really endeared her to me always. And she's playing in the U.S. Open this year. She's coming back. Yes.
Is
As
she
a
older
wild
or
card.
younger
She's
than
45.
Serena?
She's older.
Wow, I thought she was older. Yeah,
Yeah, she's older.
45 is really old to be.
It is.
Sorry, it seems like
I
kindergarten
know.
to me, but
But
nonetheless.
we love you, Venus. We're rooting
Wow.
for you.
Good for her.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I'm really excited.
Well, one thing about professional sports is that there's plenty of criminal opportunities there. I mean, there's a lot of money, there's
Yeah.
a lot of jealousy, there's a lot of ambition, there are a lot of parents behaving badly.
Yes.
There's, I mean, so it's a pretty fertile ground if,
yeah.
for a crime writer, for a thriller writer.
It is. It's really been fun to like examine all that and the motives, like you said, are like right there for you. You know, there's jealousy and there's just not like overspending or, I'm
And
saying
now-
it mildly.
Now there's
but
online betting, and I'm sure that's
Yeah.
infusing. Dick Francis and his, I was a Dick Francis total addict. And actually, I will say, a little plug here, Felix, who I didn't think was doing a particularly great job. It was actually Mary who wrote the books, Mary Francis, and Dick provided well, when she died, we all discovered that it was Mary, not Dick. That was the writer, but Dick, they were a team.
Yeah.
Because Dick was the person who rode the horses and provided all of the, but Mary was the writer. Anyway, Felix, their son, has written 2 or 3, which sorry, Felix, wasn't particularly impressed with. But his new one, I mean, I always give people another chance. His new one's amazing. And part of it is, in fact, the money pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But also it's about how hard it is to, not only break into a circuit, but stay on a circuit and finance
Yeah.
yourself. And horses are incredibly expensive.
Yes. they
So
are.
there's an extra problem if you're in the horse world, which is not
Oh,
like buying a
sure.
tennis racket.
No.
It's more
no.
like buying a Stradivarius with legs.
Yes. I mean the amount of money that goes into the teams that you have to have around
Yeah.
you, especially with the tennis, is phenomenal. Like
Yeah.
it's so large. Did you read Open by Andre Agassi? It's one of the best autobiographies I've ever read, and it talks
And the sports
about
thing. Yeah.
yeah. It's because it feels so honest. Open. A lot of meanings there. But you have, your coaches and your trainers and just this entourage and then all the travel and everything. And I mean, you live or die based on your tournaments. It's so much pressure. I think one of the interesting things I learned as a reporter covering sports was how many good sports there were, the sportsmanship. I was really surprised by what good losers professional players were. For example, when Al Leiter from the Mets lost the last game in the World Series against the Yankees, he was the pitcher. He went to Shea Stadium after, and he was literally cleaning out his locker, and he just was like, I was bad. I didn't throw a good game. We lost. And I just was like amazed at how matter of fact so many players are when they lose, and how I guess mentally you have to be able to move on to the next game. And if you spiral about it, you're not going to have that mental ability. And that fascinates me, like the mind game of the whole thing. So yeah, it's very interesting. And, I hope I got into some of that too.
Well, you will. I mean, in some place like football, for example, there really are family dynastics. I mean, we have them here with the Cardinals. And for a while, excuse me, for a while we had a customer that used to come into the store, very blonde, very Texan, and she bought, amazing amounts of books, not very often, but when she was here, she would buy amazing amounts of books, whatever it is. And so we were kind of used to her. And then one day she came in and she started giving out Dallas cowboy hats to everybody. And finally we figured out she was Jerry Jones' sister. And, but she never never like mentioned that, but the reason it was so funny was while she was here giving out the hats, Bill Bidwell Sr. was a great reader. He came in because he was a customer. So Bill's over here, and Jerry's sister's handing out cowboy hats, and Bill's going around this. Fortunately, Bill Bidwell was not, what's the right word? He wasn't that attuned to his surroundings, and so he kind of really didn't notice her. So we're all going, but or at least I was, but he was kind of indifferent to it. So, but I mean, now I think that there are more people, more billionaires trading sports teams, kind of like playing cards. But there still are some of those, owner dynasties around.
Yeah, I agree with you. And players jumping from team to team and getting traded
I
like that.
I lost my interest in baseball when they started doing that. I mean, come on, I grew up in Chicago with, Chico Carrasquel and was he the Cub, Mr. Cub? Was it who was Mr. Cub? Was it Chico? Anyway,
I don't know that.
Well, but I mean, there were players who spent their whole careers,
at one place,
with one, with one team, and for fans it was a big deal.
Yeah,
and then they started moving the franchises to other locations, and people changed teams in the middle of the season. It was like, right.
I know. I agree with you. I mean, I grew up Yankees, Giants.
Right. My husband grew up with the Dodgers because he's from New York. And he never recovered from them leaving New York.
My parents either. My parents didn't either. They grew up like right near the stadium there.
Right.
Yes, that was traumatic. But it feels more like a business now. I mean, I guess it always was, but it was hidden. And now it really does feel like a business. I mean, you have some icons. Like you're talking about Chicago. So I covered Michael Jordan's second retirement. Right. I think there was one more after that, but and even he went somewhere else after. But
so you could go into golf because LIV and the PGA have given you an absolutely wonderful potential scenario for. I'm sorry, but I'm hoping the LIV thing just sinks without a trace. Talk about trying to just buy your way into something, And I noticed the sports column, Jason Gay, a sports columnist, you probably know who he is, wrote a really interesting piece not long ago about the fact that all these guys that sold out and went to LIV, none of them are doing well. There's no competition for them anymore. They're just, they're just kind of there for show. And so they've all lost their edge and they're not scoring well and nobody actually cares about LIV golf. So, it's like 1% of the people watching. I'm addicted to the Masters and the British Open. I have not missed a Masters for like 60 years.
I covered the U.S. Open golf in Pinehurst when Payne Stewart won.
Right.
And that was a tough assignment for me because I experienced a lot of sexism there, and not from Payne Stewart, but I was covering it, and the public relations person for the U.S. Open was just very anti-women. And the one thing I needed to get was an interview from whoever won. And he promised I would get that, even though I was getting nothing else. And Payne Stewart won, and they're bringing Payne Stewart around to CNNSI and ESPN, and then like really small stations. And I mean, I'm at one of the biggest stations national for sports, and he's just skipping me every time. And he didn't know me before. Like there was nothing that had happened. And he's dragging Payne away down an area where I can't walk. And my cameraman's like, do something. And I'm, and again, like we're little. So, you're even the golfers, like you're surrounded by all these big people and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so I screamed. I'm like, Payne, please do an interview. And Payne turned around. The guy had his hand on Payne's arm, pulling him. And Payne's like, no. Deb's worried. He's like, no, I want to do this interview. And he came back and he did it. And I I was so relieved because I thought I would lose my job if I didn't get the interview. And then it took me like decades later to realize like that wasn't my fault. That was on them. But for years, I blamed myself. I'm like, what should I have done different? How should I have acted different? Like, I didn't understand the dynamics and what was going on. And, but Payne saved me.
Was he wearing his +4s?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that was always so cool to see him.
He was so sweet. Payne was one of the sweetest
he
guys.
He really was. But it was such a
Such
shame
a tragedy.
what happened.
Yeah. It's such a tragedy. I was, yeah.
Right. So we're here talking about tennis, but in point of fact, are you going to kind of go from sport to sport? And if so, how are you reconciling her job with moving from one sport to another?
Actually, a little bit of news. I'm doing a new series. I'm starting a new series, and that's about a news reporter based in New York. So I'm going back to that part of my life.
Well, then you can chase stories.
I can
anywhere.
chase all these stories. Yeah.
Right.
So I think if I did go back to another sport, and if I come back to the Kate Green series, in my brain I'm thinking that I would do spring training in Florida, because the players are so relaxed there, and it's a different experience, like to see, Derek Jeter and Bernie Williams hanging out, and Bernie Williams is playing the guitar, and they're relaxed, and that was a fun vibe. But yeah, right now I'm working on a story about a news reporter.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Right. Well, any of you have questions that you might like to ask? It's really been fun. Or I could tell more golf stories.
At what point did was there the death involved, and how well, a sports reporter, I remember when I was in school, I took a journalism class, and it was taught by a sports reporter.
Oh, interesting.
Who had worked with the Washington Post, because I was in the D.C. area.
Wait a minute, Isabella. Nobody's going to be able to hear you. Let me do this, okay?
Okay. Anyway, really, really quick. So when I learned a little bit about journalism, just enough to be dangerous, but he explained to me that sports reporting is unusual. It's unlike anything else because it is its own entity all in and of itself. I never thought about that. Mm-hmm. He goes, you have the rest of the newspaper, but in the sports section, you have weddings, you have funerals, you have crime, you have, accidents, you have, everything that would ordinarily be covered in all the other individual aspects of the paper are universally covered in sports. So I was wondering, when you're writing this, how does that kind of ethos play into it, where you're dealing with a person's entire life and death?
Yeah, it's interesting. I never thought about it the way he explained it, and it's probably because I started as a news reporter. I think the thing that I took the most from my days of reporting is writing in the present tense and writing what's happening immediately. Like it's not, this happened a while ago and now we're looking back at it. It's what's going on right now. Because I worked at an all sports station, I guess I didn't have the other things you're mentioning, like the other elements of a newspaper, and I always was in broadcast, so it wasn't as much something I thought about. Although when I did work at the Associated Press, I was taking stats, and there were other people doing the obituaries and all of that stuff, and we're all on the same desk. But I guess in the AP, I didn't really think about the placement. So, yeah.
You want to pass that around? Yeah, I will.
So the family dynamics are pretty huge.
Yeah.
There are a lot of family dynamics for the tennis players, but also kind of parallels what Kate and then her father. Can you kind of go into the family dynamics and how you decided how to go with those to make that parallel work? Because it really does. It really works great.
Thank you. I wonder how much I was conscious of doing that and how much I wasn't. But I did try to tie up a lot of it in that. I think with tennis, I was really thinking about, while everything isn't based on actual players, I was really thinking about all the dynamics that are there, which is the relationship between a parent and the child they're coaching, because they're children at that age. And one of the main characters is like 17 or 18. And it's not a balanced relationship with the dad and then with the daughter. And well, you're right. Like that is exactly what happens with Kate and her father. Okay, I didn't realize that at all. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me start again. I thought that out very well. It was all planned. Next time I will say that. Yeah, and then Kate has her issues with her father, abandonment issues that start in the first book, and then he's the detective, so she needs him, but at the same time she doesn't really trust him. And then should she trust him? Maybe he's more trustworthy and he's hiding a secret. And in the case of Close Call, there were a lot of secrets that parents were hiding. So, yeah. Sometimes your subconscious, do you guys find that like is really doing the work for you and you don't even realize it, and then someone says something and it just like hits you? Like I never realized why I went into crime. Why did I do thrillers versus a different thing? I mean, it's obvious why I do a reporter, but I never thought about it. And then I heard another author speaking, and it was like to get like kind of the darkness out of you and just kind of all the angst and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, that's why I'm doing it. Because as a crime, I covered so much crime before, I really was affected by it. I mean, I remember my mom, who I think is watching, hi Mom, saying to me, you're always down because every day my reality was someone dying, or some tragedy, or a serial killer, something like that. And it wasn't my story. I was telling the story, but it wasn't my emotions to feel, but it stayed with me. And so I think I wrote crime, to sort of try to deal with those emotions and give them a place to go out. It was very cathartic to kind of do that. So, but I didn't realize it, until I heard someone else talking about it.
I also think that a lot of authors go into crime because there's a structure in the mystery or in the thriller, and it's a little daunting to figure out how to tell a story if you haven't actually written one before. And so that scaffolding is, and it's true of romance too. There's an absolute scaffolding for writing romance, and probably now in fantasy, I suspect, since we are so, I'm telling you that there's practically nothing publishing next year but fantasy. It really isn't. No, I'm just, did you look at the bestseller list on this week? There's not a single crime or thriller on it. There's this, publishing is a business, as you've pointed out, and it does chase trends. And right now people are not as interested in the dark as they are in, exactly. And so the kind of cozy crime, which is really more like romance, sort of like formulaic, like romance, or fantasy, either soft. I learned a term last year when Sarah Beth Durst was here called cottagecore. There's all vocabulary to romantasy. And I thought, what's that? And then it turns out it's cozy romantasy, as opposed to dragon and sex romantasy, as opposed to God. And right now, the other thing that's coming out just in enormous quantity is horror. So that's a different kind of escape. So we have the escape into the really dark. We have the escape into the completely make-believe. And then we have the escape into basically the romance cozy thing. And it's a tough moment right now, I think, for thrillers and crime fiction, in that readers it's too much like real life at the moment.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think anyone who knows me, if it was a choice between scaffolding for romance and scaffolding for thriller, I can barely get my sex scene out for close call. So it's something I'm working on. Yeah, I've got to get. I know. I got to get better at that. I've been told that a lot, actually.
How did what? Oh,
Is there a sports figure that you would find interesting to write about as a character?
As a character, that is because will that get me into trouble? Do you mean like fiction, nonfiction? I think I took a lot of elements and smushed them in. So, for example, in Close Call, there's a character that my veteran, my aging veteran, she doesn't sign autographs, and that was something that Patrick Ewing never did. But I always thought that there was more to him than that, and I always liked him. He wasn't necessarily the most popular player, but among fans or reporters, but I got to know him. I covered the Knicks a lot, and I think he was misunderstood, and I gave her that quality. So I guess I took that from there, and then the Sunny Up, that's what they call her in the back of the book, upstart, Bryn comes out with an iPhone, on the court, and she's looks like she's very out there and confident and big personality. And it was from Shane Battier, who is confident and all that stuff. When he was in the Final Four for Duke, I always got assigned to Duke. He came out back then with like a big video camera because they didn't have phones back then, and I just thought that was so interesting. So I guess I do that. I take bits and pieces from players. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Andre Agassi, so maybe in there I'm thinking, but I think I just smush a lot of things together. Is that a literary term? Smush?
smush, smush, spell that. And then at the U.S. Open, what's so cool is that for all of your books, you take us to the actual locations where only so few people have been able to actually experience. And I think that is so cool. So you decided on the U.S. Open at Forest Lawns, and then there was the Rampage scene. That was book 2, wasn't it?
That was book 2 in Yankee Stadium,
At Yankee Stadium. So can you just go into it a little bit about the locations? Because, I mean, we don't know anything about that. So when you bring that stuff in, that just brings all of the books to life for me.
Thank you. I really wanted to take people to the places at iconic locations that they don't see. So, everyone knows Madison Square Garden, but do they know like the broken down elevator that only the press go through, or the fact that, you don't, right? Like, or that we hang out on the court the morning before a basketball game and we're like right there where the players are, and there's, a back and forth, or what it's like inside the locker rooms. And it was so interesting, all of that, to be there. So in Close Call, the interview room where Kate conducts the interview with Lucy, who's the aging veteran, that's based on the interview room that I remember in my brain where I interviewed Venus Williams. And it's not a place that the public gets to go. So I really wanted to take people to those places and the places you wouldn't see. I will say, I did go back to all the places after, because I covered it as a reporter. I had been to the U.S. Open as a fan, but as a crime reporter, crime fiction author, you see things a little sideways. So I brought my son, and we're on the outer courts, watching a match, and and the ushers are like, don't like to be interrupted or like bad behavior, and I see something on the concourse, and I'm like, get up, and I rush out. The usher's like giving me a dirty look, and I run back. I take a picture. I come back. I'm like, look, Ryan, look at what I took a picture of. And he's looking because it's a refrigeration unit, just a giant refrigeration unit. I'm like, that is such a good place to hide a body. So like that's where my mind was going. And so you always have to go back to visit those places.
Patrick, is there anything? Sorry. Are there any questions from the audience you'd like to bring out? You probably can't hear me since the speaker in the room is not working. I was, right.
Boy, what an interesting night. Yes. Well, one of the questions, you may have already addressed this, is what sports do you like to play yourself?
No, she didn't.
I did it. That's a new one. Okay. Sigh. I'm not the best athlete in the world, although I play one in fiction. I did play tennis, and I did make it onto my high school, freshman high school tennis team as the last double. But I really had trouble with competition. Like I wasn't bad, but I would get really nervous when we would get close to a point. So my son Ryan is working on my competitive mind game. I blame my dad because he used to try to psych me out when he'd play tennis with me. And he's going to be listening too. So yeah, you got my parents there. Hi, Dad. But I've always been a sports fan. Like I do love sports, and I do love watching soccer. That may be one of my favorite sports to watch.
Great. There was another question here. It was more of a comment about, I think Chris Evert may have said something about how, back in her prime, everybody knew each other. It was much more of a community, whereas now, all the big sports figures are very isolated with their own staffs and protected, and it's just a different vibe.
Yeah, it's interesting because we were talking about that too with players changing teams so easily, and it's much more of like a business type environment. It's interesting because Chris Evert, dated Jimmy Connors for a while, and like that's one of the kind of things that I try to the you're on tour with all these people that you have relationships with, and it's got to get sticky, right? But I do think that there's been a big change. Especially with like social media now and everything.
Absolutely.
Well, television was the thing that really changed it.
True.
When people used to go,
Yeah.
as you say, you had to live somewhere in proximity to a ballpark or a tennis or whatever, and then television came along.
Yeah.
And makes it. And then all this money came in.
Yes.
And I'm really appalled by online betting because, think about Pete Rose, and what happened to him of a player betting on himself. But now, how could you even tell?
Yeah, I think there's a book in there.
Well, as soon as you get big money, there's more crime.
Yeah.
So, well,
Yeah.
Doesn't that all seem kind of quaint now? The notion of someone getting in trouble for betting.
Well, there's many things
culture
that
today,
things seem quaint that didn't seem
know.
quaint a year ago.
Exactly.
So I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but yes, it does.
There was a really good question, which is, do you remember the first sports game you ever attended?
Yeah, I think I went to Yankee Stadium with my dad, and it was Bat Day, and I'm going to butcher the name, but Thurman Munson?
No, that's right.
Thurman?
Yeah. And he was there. Yeah. My dad took me to Yankee Stadium. Do you remember yours?
Well, yeah, I do actually. Back when we were, feral children and nobody was, monitoring us or anything. I lived north of Chicago in Winnetka, and the North Shore Railroad is an electric railroad. There were two, but that ran from Winnetka down to Chicago, but it always stopped at Addison, which is Wrigley Field. So from the time I was 10 or whatever it is, I was, hopped on the train and went down to, got off at Addison, went to Wrigley Field. So I spent a lot of my childhood in Wrigley Field, and the coldest I ever was going to a game at Soldiers Field and sitting in the very top of the, it's built like the Coliseum,
Yeah.
with my back to Lake Michigan. And, there was a blizzard come. My dad was an All-American at Northwestern.
Oh,
he
wow.
was, in his day in the 1930s, he was the biggest guy playing. And so they couldn't knock him over, which one reason he
Wow.
was an All-American. And I've always loved this story. He and my mother dated. They were both at Northwestern, and he was a year ahead of her. And he was offered a contract with the Green Bay Packers. And my mother legendarily said to him, Gibbs, she said, my last name was Gibson, so he was called Gibb, if you want to get married, you have to get a real job. Because at that point, a contract with the Packers was $100 a game and found. There was
Wow.
well, come on, this is 1937. There wasn't, and she was right in that sense. So fortunately, he had become friends with the commissioner, the Big Ten commissioner. And so they said to him, if you're not going to actually play, why don't you come and be an umpire? You can run the defensive line.
Ooh.
So for 25 years, he was a Big Ten official on the weekends. I mean, he did have a real job. He was one of the presidents that put General Telephone together. But so back in the day, there was a black and white newsreel that went before the movies. It was the Warner Path of the News. Remember that? So my brother and I, my sister and I, actually my brother was too young, we would go up to the Winnetka Community House to see the Saturday afternoon feature and to see Daddy, because there he was, when they were filming. And we could always tell him because he had this cool bald spot right on the back of his head. And then when he'd come home, they had very distinctive uniforms, the big black and white shirts and the red handkerchief and all. And he was a really big guy, so we can remember the uniforms
that's so great.
hanging up, But then he took up golf. My brother was a captain of the golf team at New Trier, and he's actually the eighth longest lived member at Paradise Valley Country Club. I mean, because he got to join when he was 21. Girls did not get to join the country club when they were 21, but boys got to join.
Not right.
I know. So, so I kind of grew up in part in a golf course and a golf family, because that's where that went. So lots of golf.
You grew up in a real sports family. I mean, that's
I did.
really interesting. Yeah.
My favorite thing, and we'll stop here because I know you have things to do, but I always think about this. When I was between husbands, before I met Rob, who we will have been married 35 years in December, so there we are. But anyway, I was going to move from Virginia, where I had lived for a while, to Phoenix, and I had a break of time, and I thought I would go and spend some time in England. And what I particularly wanted to do was go to Scotland and look at all the golf courses. And so I was dating, for some reason, a guy that he was a scratch golfer.
Oh, wow.
So if you want to go and play at St. Andrews and whatever, you have to register. You have to register your handicap. You have to have your country club, attest that you are that good, the whole 9 yards. And so I was able to do that. And so I met Stephen in wherever it was. Must have been Edinburgh. And then we were doing the whole thing. We went all the way up to Royal Dornoch, which is the farther northest golf course. And I realized as I'm standing on one of the big double greens of St. Andrews, and the wind is whistling up the Firth of Forth, and the rain is coming. I'm in Gore-Tex, and the rain is coming down, and I'm getting wet, and I'm thinking, why am I here? And I looked over, and Stephen is very casually lining up his putt. And I thought, I'm just not good enough for this. So when it was over, I said to him, I'm packing it in, and I am going to caddy the rest of this trip. I am going to caddy for you. And it was so much fun, but they didn't know what to do with me. And, the caddies were like aghast and all. And Royal Beerfield won't let women in the clubhouse. So, it was right. But I've always remembered that was like a tour of all these famous golf courses, Glen Eagle, all the British Open courses, the whole bit for 2 weeks. And no pressure because I was just carrying the
were
bag.
at it, yeah.
I know. There's no out of bounds. If you go out of bounds, you're in the gorse, you're in the water. I mean, it's Scottish golf is really hard.
Oh,
It's
I've
really
heard.
hard.
I've heard. Yeah.
Except for Glen Eagles, which is more or less like the Greenbrier here. But that's my favorite sports thing that I ever did was to caddy
I
for
mean,
2 weeks
I
in
think
Scotland.
that's really cool. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I loved it. It was so great. Anyway,
That's awesome.
thank you. Thank you all for coming. Elise, it was lovely to have you here. Thank you for joining
having
us.
me.
Virtual audience, thank you very much for being with us. Bye. There we go. Yeah. I love it when we're small.
Thank you. This was amazing. Thank you.
I often think about that, that to be in the sports world but not under pressure. I think that's what I loved about that if I were playing.